Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Juan, I am just one reader, and it is 2019. Welcome to another great year of reading and book reviewing, talking about books, and of course, engaging in this wonderful community that we have, that is BookTube. So in today's video, I will be doing my first 4 book reviews of the year. In case this video goes on for way too long, I will tell you right now what the 4 books will be so that if you're interested in them, you can watch the whole video. In case you're interested in just some of them, you can go to that section of the video. And in case you're not interested in any of them, you can just use your time wisely and go and watch some other video that is more interesting to you. So, today we will be covering The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, Broadway Nights by Seth Rudetsky, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and Young People's Concerts by Leonard Bernstein. Before we get started, I want to let you know that in 2019, I will be using the 1 to 5 star rating system that everybody uses on BookTube and on Goodreads. However, I will also be using the 1 to 10 rating scale. I feel like the 1 to 10 scale system allows me to be more specific in terms of book reviewing and rating my books. So having said that, let's start with the reviews. The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton was the winner of the Man Booker Prize in 2013. Even though it was written in that year, it is emulating a Victorian novel, so it is written in a Victorian register and it feels old, ancient, and classical. Eleanor Catton is the youngest author to have ever won the Man Booker Prize, and The Luminaries is the longest novel to have ever won this award. The story of The Luminaries definitely feels like a Victorian novel. It has multiple characters, multiple plot lines, we go back and forth in time. Ultimately, the book feels like a big, complex mechanism of stories within stories, and it is very complex and I would say complicated, or rather, very challenging. The story is about gold, the gold rush, fortune, horse, opium dens, murder, mystery, intrigue, drama, identity theft, a lot of different things that you would find in a Victorian novel, but it feels very modern and accessible. I will say that this book is very ambitious and very intimidating. It's a book that, first of all, is really long, coming in at 832 pages, and the first section alone is 360 pages. One of my negative criticisms to this book would be that that section of the book, the opening one, was very long and very, very difficult. In this section of the book, there is a lot of exposition, a lot of backtracking, and the author is setting the context for everything that will later on happen in the book. That part of the book can be very difficult to follow. I was very disoriented and confused. However, if you feel discouraged by that confusing first opening section of the book, I will suggest that you keep reading, because later on things get easier, you start picking up on things, and as you get more and more immersed in these characters and their stories, even if you didn't understand stuff from that first section, you will understand it later. As I was reading The Luminaries, I was constantly in awe of how someone could achieve a feat of writing such as this one. This book is very complex and it achieves a lot. It manages to do a lot really well, even though it is not my favorite book in the world, and even though it's not a book that I see myself rereading really, or at least not in the near future, it still is a book that really impressed me on different levels. For example, I really thought the way that Eleanor Catton played with the structure, the form, the format of the book, how she mapped out this story and these characters' plot lines using zodiac signs, astrological charts, and stuff like that, or as you can tell from the cover, using the lunar cycles as a guideline to plot the novel, which is something that you will find as you read along. I thought that was very clever, really ambitious, and I don't understand how she achieved it. Even though I did find this book very confusing and disorienting at times, and even though I did have some problems with the pacing and the rhythm in certain sections of the book, the first one in particular, I would definitely recommend this book to everybody. I feel that every kind of reader out there would benefit from reading The Luminaries. The reading experience was very unique and very special to me. It's a reading experience that strengthened me as a reader, and it made me realize that I am equipped to read this kind of book that is more challenging, that feels intimidating, that feels classical, that has a lot of plot lines, a lot of things going on, and that even though I might feel confused at times or out of sorts, it made me feel like I can do it and that I am up to the challenge. So this book was great for boosting up my confidence. And yeah, I would definitely suggest it, even if you do not want to read this book based on its premise or its genre or its length. This book, even though it is really long, it took me a week to read, less than a week. And I am a very slow reader, but the book is very accessible, very readable, and it will make you a better reader, a more confident reader, and it will allow you, I think, to take more risks. In the end, I am giving The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton 3 out of 5 stars, but 8 out of 10. Moving on to the next book, we have Broadway Nights by Seth Rudetsky. This is a novel published originally in 2007, and Seth Rudetsky is a Broadway expert, connoisseur. He is kind of a Broadway personality slash celebrity. He is very knowledgeable and he has a very particular voice. He has a YouTube channel. He works for Playbill, for Broadway.com, and he's just one of those Broadway people. He knows a lot about what happens on Broadway, and this book is a clear reflection of that. I have been a fan of Seth Rudetsky for quite a long time now, for many years, and I didn't really know that he had this novel. I accidentally stumbled upon this book at a secondhand bookstore in New York, and I just saw Seth Rudetsky's name, and I immediately bought the book. And I was not even aware of the fact that it is a signed copy, so this is like a really important treasure for me. So, Broadway Nights is a novel about a main character who really resembles Seth Rudetsky himself. I mean, I don't know Seth Rudetsky himself in person, of course. I can only appreciate or get a glimpse as to what he must be like from what we see from his videos. And maybe on his videos, he's using a persona or a more kind of enhanced version of who he is, which is what people always do when they are in front of a camera. Now, this particular novel is about a character who, as I said, really resembles what I think Seth Rudetsky must be like, at least in certain aspects. He, the protagonist of the novel, is a musician who is working on Broadway as a substitute conductor of orchestra, and we follow him as he is trying to make it on Broadway and make his own Broadway show and conduct his own show and all of that. But we also follow his everyday life and more concretely, his love life. Basically, the book is written as a diary, as a journal entries, and that's the way that the book works. Now, I thought this book was absolutely right for me, and it might not be for everybody out there because it's a very kind of niche kind of book. It's very specific for certain people, I think. And that kind of people, that's my kind of people. That's who I am. Basically, this book, it has a lot of references to Broadway stars, actual information about Broadway things that is real information about real people and real Broadway history. Seth Rudetsky, because he's a part of the show business, he gives you a sort of backstage pass into the whole, world of show business and Broadway auditions and how everything works. And it's so interesting and so fascinating. Even though this is not a work of nonfiction, I learned a lot about Broadway. In that regard, the book made me think a lot about the TV show Smash, which was about the same topic of Broadway and making it on Broadway and making a musical and all the work that goes into, the whole Broadway jam. And yeah, if you enjoy that kind of thing, go ahead and read this book. You will totally eat it up the way that I did. The book is absolutely hysterical. It's so funny. Seth Rudetsky has this wonderful sense of humor. I find him really funny, and he's just really exaggerated and ridiculous, and he has a lot of musings and little things that are just like so funny to me. The book is surprisingly heartfelt, and I found myself being really invested emotionally in this character and characters in the novel and the relationships and everything that happened in his love life. And yes, of course, this book is a light comedy. It's not big literature or anything like that. It's not trying to be. It's not the most, well written book in the universe or the most profound philosophical book in the world. It's what it is, and it is perfect in that way. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. Now, yes, I did have some minor problems with the book, mainly that I found it predictable. There were certain things that I knew were going to happen that turned out to be true. And again, even though it was not a problem for me, Seth Rudetsky has such a specific voice that if you like it, you will love everything about this book. But if you really don't like it, you will absolutely hate everything in this book. So I feel like that could be a problem for some readers. Either you get along with him and with his speaking style and his writing style and his overall tone, or you just don't. In the end, I would of course recommend this book. It was total fun. I had a fabulous time. And if you are a Broadway or theater geek nerd like I am, or if you just enjoy comical writing and writing, reading about this world, I would absolutely recommend it. I gave Broadway Nights by Seth Rudetsky 4 out of 5 stars and 8.5 out of 10. Next up, we have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. In this novel, we follow the character of Kathy, who at the beginning of the book is a woman who has a weird job. We know that she is what people call a carer, meaning that she's kind of a nurse and she has to look after some patients, but things are very unclear and sort of mysterious, and the reader has to figure things out throughout the novel. Eventually, the novel jumps back in time and we follow Kathy's childhood as she grew up with some friends and some very important people in her life in this very secluded, very exclusive, very weird boarding school in England. And we see what happened in this school. We see the way that things work for the people who live in this school, and things are just very mysterious, and we follow their stories as they grow up in this place, and we start to get some answers. Now, as I said, this book feels very mysterious. There is an underlying current of suspense and like you're not being told the complete truth, which is really what the book is about, or one of the main threads of the book, I think. Now, I have read some reviews in which people say that they never saw the big plot twist coming. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But there is a plot twist, or I don't know if it's a plot twist, but in the end, there's an answer, there's a revelation, there's a lot of, mysteries unveiled. And I don't know if this is just me, but I predicted the whole thing from very early on. I don't think this was a hindrance or a problem or something that took away from my experience. I didn't really care. I sort of had my suspicions from very early on, and they turned out to be true. I was right all along. However, that never took me out of the book, that never took any of the pleasure of reading the book away. It's a very suspenseful, mysterious, quick little novel, and I absolutely enjoyed reading it. And even though I found it predictable and a little bit anticlimactic at the end, there were a lot of things to relish or to enjoy from reading this book. The writing style is very elegant and very simple, but really well crafted. This book actually reminded me a lot of The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, which is thematically and topically a very similar book about reminiscing and looking back on your life and reassessing the memories that you have of your life and trying to piece the puzzle together. And it feels like you are constantly putting the pieces together to try to get the bigger picture. So it was reminiscent of that. It also reminded me of the novel Under the Skin by Michelle Faber in terms of the tone. Never Let Me Go is wonderful in its use of tone. The tone that the author achieves throughout the novel is really special, really unique, and really cleverly done. The tone is sort of slightly disturbing, but you never really know why. So while I was reading this book, I was constantly feeling out of sorts, out of wits, slightly unnerved, and sort of weirded out, but I never could quite put my finger on what it was that was giving me that feeling. Something else that this book does that I think is really positive is it raises a lot of ethical, moral questions that I think are really relevant today more than ever. Um, in that regard, this book is similar, or I would compare it to The Semplica Girl Diaries, which is a wonderful short story by George Saunders. If you have read Never Let Me Go, I would strongly suggest reading The Semplica Girl Diaries. And even if you haven't read Never Let Me Go, go ahead and read that story. It is one of my favorite stories that I've ever read, and it raises a lot of similar questions that Never Let Me Go does, and it actually might be better than this one. I think the Semplica Girl Diaries might do the same thing a little bit better. So in the end, I would recommend this book. I gave Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro 3 out of 5 stars and 8 out of 10. And finally, the last book that we will cover in today's video is Young People's Concerts by the one and only Leonard Bernstein. So back in the 60s, I believe, Leonard Bernstein made this series of concerts with a big full orchestra. And these concerts were addressed mainly to young people, and the whole objective was to use this orchestra and this big concerts to explain in a very clear, simple way certain concepts, basic concepts of musical theory. So that's why this is called Young People's Concerts. These are concerts for young people to understand musical theory better. And this book is the transcript, or rather the written version of those concerts. So in each chapter, we get one concert dedicated to one topic, and we have these pictures of the actual concert live with Bernstein conducting and demonstrating and talking and lecturing. And we also have a lot of illustrations that are really wonderfully drawn. And of course, we get a lot of music, a lot of music. This is just the tip of the iceberg, I am telling you. This book actually does not contain a lot of text. It was very much a quick read. I read this in like a day and a half because most of the content looks like this. It's just music. So let's talk about this book. What I really liked about this book was Bernstein. Like, it was like listening to Bernstein speaking. Even though this is translated into Spanish and everything, and it is a written book, it feels like you have Bernstein with you explaining these concepts to you personally. His voice is very warm. His pedagogy, his way of explaining this very specific, very theoretical musical concepts is very simple. It's very down to earth. He is not like a stuck up, snobbish, classical music kind of person. He is rather the opposite. He is like a real human guy and he just wants you to enjoy music. There were some chapters in here that I absolutely adored. In particular, the chapters in which he talks about humor, how music can be funny, and how music can achieve comedy. There's another chapter in which he talks about folklore and how folklore is really and storytelling and folklore are really the basis or the inspiration for music and for classical music. There is another chapter talking about language and how language and the way that people talk and read and the way that a language wires our brains and therefore wires our musicality and our musical skills, our musical tendencies. However, as much as I liked this book and as much as I wanted to love a book such as this one, I just could not. This book feels very incomplete. I actually do not recommend this book because it's a book. It's a book about music and regardless of all the effort that went into making this beautiful book, which is actually very, very pretty, and the illustrations are really gorgeous, and there's a lot of them. This is a really pretty book, but I would not recommend it just because it's a book and it's not supposed to be experienced in this format, in this way. Like, this was the master of masters, the father of fathers. This was God himself, Bernstein, talking about music and with an orchestra in front of people. And we don't get that experience. We just can't. The book is limited because of its writing and it's not music. So I would not recommend this book, and it breaks my heart to say it. So in the end, I am giving Young People's Concerts by Leonard Bernstein a 3 out of 5 stars, but a 7 out of 10. Those are all the books for this episode. Thank you for joining me again on another evening of reviewing. I am Just One Reader, and I will see you on the next video.